Welcome back to Earth Station Trek, a show where we trek from the early days on NBC to the future on Paramount Plus and everywhere in between. I'm Charles Kelso, and it's my privilege to introduce the Earth Station Trek crew: Keith Johnson,
Jolan True,
Alan Seiler,
May the 4th be with you.
and Veronica Dashel.
I'm back.
Yay!
And tonight we're going to be talking about a lot of things that are upcoming in Star Trek, from Section 31 to Starfleet Academy, potentially Star Trek Legacy. But first, Keith, do we have some This Week in Trek this week?
We do. We have a couple of things going on. The first one I'm going to mention is it's a personal thing for me. It's because this is my favorite episode of the original, of the animated series. But on the 30th of April, 1938, was born one Larry Niven, who created the race that was the Kzinti race, the cat, the feline cat creatures that was featured in the animated series episode, The Slaver Weapon, which is my favorite episode of the animated series. Yes, sorry folks, it's not the one where Spock goes back in time to meet his younger self. Ironically, kind of like those who love the Tholian Web, it's also the only animated series episode where Kirk doesn't have an appearance in it.
But so you're not a Kirk guy.
I love Kirk, but it's such a great episode with the whole concept of the slaver weapons and all the other stuff that goes on in that, and the Kazin. I just love that. Moving forward, and Charles had posted this in our group. This is super important. On the 1st of May, 1923, 100 years old, Star Trek, the original series director, Ralph Senesky, was born. And is still going and still making appearances and still appearing on podcasts. We need to try to get him.
Yeah,
I have. I've emailed him.
Really?
He didn't answer.
And just sharp as heck. And for those who know, Ralph Senesky is, I think, the number 3 most prolific director of the original series. He directed episodes This Side of Paradise, Bread and Circuses, Obsession, Return to Tomorrow, and Metamorphosis. What I found interesting in researching Ralph is his original first episode of Star Trek was supposed to be The Devil in the Dark. But there was a scheduling switch, and his first episode became This Side of Paradise, the famous one with the spores. And going from an episode that was kind of an adventure, kind of sort of a quote unquote monster episode, to one that was so deeply as emotional as This Side of Paradise, the studio was super impressed with his ability to pivot like that. And so they brought him back for other episodes. And I think every episode he directed, I did enjoy. Something else I found I didn't realize, everybody probably knows the 3rd season of the original series was infamous for Fred Freiberger taking over and the major budget cuts to the show. Well, Ralph Senesky directed the Tholian Web, but he went over schedule and over budget, and Freiberger fired him, and then brought someone else in to finish the show. Although the vast majority of the footage seen in that episode was Ralph's, he just doesn't have credit for it.
Wow!
And to this day, he doesn't like to talk about that.
Wow!
Yeah, absolutely amazing, great director. And moving on, this one is important. Like I said, I typically don't like to do deaths, but in 2015, we lost Grace Lee Whitney, who was Janice Rand, an important person, I think, in Star Trek history, especially. I love it when she came back for the movies because she was written out of the series for reasons I still don't quite fully understand. But it was nice to see her come back in the movie and have gotten a commission and become an officer.
Right.
And 2nd of May, this is a crazy day. 2nd of May. In 1966, the outline for the Star Trek original series episode Court Martial, where Kirk goes on trial for ejecting Ben Finney, which is always funny to me, was submitted. That is literally one of my favorite episodes. Also introduced the famous bell that we've been talking about, the ding, 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 ding at the court. Also on the 2nd of May in 1967, Veronica, first day of filming of Cat's Paw.
Yay!
The Halloween episode. Also, on the 2nd of May, 1967, first day on the set of Star Trek for one Walter Koenig.
Oh, that's cool.
Also, on the 2nd of May, 1967, the final draft was submitted for Amok Time.
Oh,
wow.
The absolute one of the best episodes ever in Star Trek history.
Yeah, it's all right.
You're right. 3rd of May, 1966. This makes sense because we're talking about the years when the show was getting kicking. Incredible day. Drafts were submitted finally for the Corbomite maneuver and the Enemy Within. Also,
Okay.
quintessential Star Trek episodes. And then the last two I have, 5th of May, 1942. This is a birthday that I think is super important to mention. 1942 was the birth of one called The Neck. Anybody guess who that might be?
The Neck.
The Neck. This actor is called The Neck for his long, thin neck.
Mark Alamo?
That's who it is, Gold the Cop.
Well, I was thinking that might be it, but I thought that's too obvious. That's too on the nose.
That's
Too on
who
the
it
neck.
was. He had other bit parts. He played a Ramen in a couple of bit parts. But those who watch the Star Trek shows may know that he first appeared as a Cardassian with sideburns and a big mustache, no doubt. In the episode, was that called The Wounded?
The
He
Wounded.
played Gul Macet.
Yep.
And then
He had a
was
few
brought-
appearances before that too.
Yeah, he's played all kinds of characters,
Mhm.
kind of like Tim Russ. Then, of course, he was brought on. They were so impressed with him as Gul Macet, they decided to bring him on for Deep Space Nine, but they wanted to redo his history of his character, and thus Gold the Cop was born.
Yeah.
Literally one of the best antagonists in all of Trek history.
Mhm.
And the last thing for me, this is an important one because this became a meme and a theme and a discussion that will not stop. On the 6th of May, 1996, aired the Voyager episode Tuvix. And did
Oh,
Janeway
dear
do the
God.
right thing or not?
We're not getting into that tonight. We'll
I
go.
know, right?
We can't go down the 2X rabbit hole.
Nope.
Right. That's This Week in Trek History.
All right. Well, if you're listening on the audio podcast, we'll take a quick break right here and promote a fellow ESO Network podcast show. But stay tuned because when we get back, we'll be talking about what's upcoming for Star Trek. So stay right there. And if you're watching with us live, we're just going to get right into it. I mean, the big thing that they've been promoting for the last few years, and now we've actually got some details on, is Section 31.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, it turns out it's taking a different form than what we expected. That Section 31 now is not going to be a show; it's going to be basically a streaming movie.
Right. I have to wonder. People have been talking about now that Michelle Yeoh is winning Oscars and all these kind of things that she's out of their price range. I just wonder if it's not that. But if it's not a schedule thing. Maybe she simply can't commit to an ongoing series like they had
Yeah.
originally planned to do Section 31. I think that she's just got so many offers in the bag that she's like, I still want to do it, but I can't do a long-term thing. Let's just, and they said a movie. And she
Maybe.
said, let's
Yeah.
do it. That's kind of my theory. That's headcanon.
Yeah.
Yeah, another possibility. I mean, it's been all over the news that streaming services are cutting back on
Right.
spending. That they could
Right.
they still want to have Michelle Yeoh, but they don't want to commit to yet another Star Trek series.
I think that's very likely as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's playing into a lot of the things that
Mhm.
have come out in the last few weeks.
What I did find interesting was that the powers that be behind the new Star Trek world said that they spoke to her after she had won her Oscar, and they were, as you were saying, Alan, they were a little concerned that she might say, "Oh, I don't have time for this. I can't do this." And she said, "Hey, I'm down for this. I love that world. I love Giorgio. I can't wait to come back." And they were pleasantly surprised, like, "Oh, she didn't say, well, I've got an Oscar now. I'll see you later." So
Yeah.
they were very happy with that. I think that's a very cool thing to hear.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
So I mean, how do we feel about it being a film instead of a series?
I think it's a good area for them to be moving into. Just the whole idea of standalone. I say let's do it. And I wasn't that interested in the topic to follow an ongoing series anyway.
Right. I don't think anyone was. I mean, they've been
Yeah.
promoting this for years, and everyone's like, okay.
Right.
I mean,
mean-
I like Michelle Yeoh, and I'm happy. I mean,
Sure.
it makes sense. I mean, she's a rising star and, Academy Award winner now. It
Mhm.
makes sense to keep her in the Star Trek universe. But yeah, the subject matter of Section 31 and Emperor Giorgio is probably the
Yeah.
least interesting idea for a show they've had since since it came back,
Yeah.
Right. But, that was generated out of, the only real thing they had going on at the time was disco.
Mhm.
And this seemed like a natural spin from that, where
Right.
you're going to have Giorgio, and you're going to have the continuation of Ash Tyler's storyline, and you have the possibility of Laurel coming back. You know, all these things make it a possibly interesting show. But
Right.
I'm fine with it just being a movie.
Mm-hmm.
Me too. I have mentioned, I think in our discussions online or in our group, that I'm old enough to have grown up at the time when the TV movie ruled, where there was
Right.
always like an ABC movie of the week and an NBC movie of the week. And those were great movies. And a one shot was always kind of nice. And it would sometimes leave you wanting more. And sometimes it would turn into something else. There were some science fiction shows and stuff that they tried to start series off of. And there were some good TV movies that were pre and post series. Like there was a couple of Incredible Hulk movies back in the day that were pretty decent. So I think a movie would be good, because I agree with Section 31. To me, it's kind of like the Borg. They're supposed to be the secretive, clandestine cloak and dagger organization, and getting too much behind the scenes and trying to explore them and expand them too much kind of, to me, takes away the mystique. It's kind of like a personal thing for me, even though it's a really good series. In the Marvel Comics world, when the history of the character Wolverine came out, I said, oh man, I didn't want to know who he was, Logan was, because he was such a mystery.
Right.
For me, with Discovery, I didn't like Section 31 anyway. I liked the way it was introduced in Deep Space Nine, where the dude, please help me with his name, the first
Sloan.
Sloan, where he literally claimed that Section 31 was him and two thugs in one little room in one little building. That was basically all about like a cloakroom.
Right.
And they could never figure out, well, is he telling the truth or not?
Yeah.
Then you find out later that admirals were complicit with Section 31.
Yeah.
Then you go back to Enterprise and they introduced Section 31. But even then, it was always this organization. You couldn't tell how widespread its influence was.
Right.
I like that.
Right. But, you know, the only real purpose for Section 31 in Enterprise was just to try anything at all to give some kind of interesting storyline to read.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
He was...
And even Section 31 is not that powerful.
Exactly.
Sorry, Reed.
Ouch.
Yeah, on DS9, like you could never tell for sure if Section 31 was just Sloan.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like this one crazy guy, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, I wasn't huge into Section 31 even on DS9. I liked Sloan and I liked a few of those stories, but it was DS9 trying to do like the conspiracy fad of the 90s. You know, it was trying to do the sort of the X-Files thing with the smoking man, that sort of thing.
Right.
Now they've described this movie as being a cross between Mission Impossible and Guardians of the Galaxy.
Which, you know, a natural fit.
Right. I can see the
you
Mission
just see those two things just like that.
Yes.
Right.
What's the Guardians angle? I see the Mission Impossible. What's
probably
we don't know.
I would guess it's just be 70s rock songs in the soundtrack.
Yes.
But I mean, I would have thought something more along the lines of like the Dirty Dozen or more recently the Suicide Squad, like where you have these sort of outcast characters and they have to come together for a mission for Section 31. Like I could see that.
That sounds good.
You know? But
that's kind of Guardians of the Galaxy as well.
Guardians of the Galaxy has sort of a lighter, more optimistic tone, I think. Where
right.
I mean, I guess not. I mean, maybe Rocket is not a great guy, you know, or Drax. So I guess that's true.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the very least, it sort of indicates there's going to be a team that she's on.
Yeah, that's a weird.
That's
a really weird reference. You're right. That's a weird reference because they're lighthearted. That's almost like a Cowboy Bebop reference or comparison for me.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't like Section 31 having all these ships and uniforms and badges and Discovery because they completely took them from a shadow organization to something like the CIA. So hopefully they're forced to do one movie. They'll have to tone that down a little bit. One thing I guess I shouldn't be surprised about. I love Section 31 as a concept, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised, even in our own Facebook group and online, the number of people who absolutely do not like Section 31 because for them it's a bridge too far away from Gene's vision of the future. And I guess that makes sense. It doesn't bother me, but there are people who are like, it should not exist in that future. I don't care what. They just, even on Deep Space Nine, there's some people like, it should not exist. I don't want to see it anymore.
I'm sorry, but idealism and realism are two very different things, and both
Amen.
can exist.
Yeah, well said. I agree. I like that. I agree with that. That's a good phrase. I'm gonna keep that. It's kind of like when Worf started.
It's all yours, man. I gift it to you.
Yeah. But that's a very good point. It's kind of like when Guinan had a talk with Worf about what Klingons really were, because he thought they were these perfect, noble samurai, and she's like, man, no, they cheat and lie and do all that kind of stuff. So I agree with you. I think Section 31 exists, especially when, let's be honest about this, when your entire quadrant of the galaxy is about to fall to the Dominion, would you really stand on your principles and not do Section 31 stuff?
Right.
Yeah. Would you?
Right.
I
Yeah,
can't say
maybe.
I
All
wouldn't. Yeah.
Is it okay if I get a bunch of comments?
Please.
Sure.
We got a bunch.
Yeah.
All right. Our buddy Dan Leckie from Scotland says, I have no interest in Section 31 film. Even that seems like an understatement. Yeah, well,
Dan. And Dan's
there's
one
a
of
lot
those
of people
there.
that agree with you.
Yeah.
He says,
and Dan,
do you guys think it's
Mhm.
possible that the current Writers Guild of America might unfortunately affect upcoming Trek productions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it will have an effect, yes.
Mhm.
Because Strange New World season 5 is in not production yet, but it's in conception, so they'll have to not work on that for a little while.
Well, season 3.
I mean 3.
Right. I'd love it if they had 3 and 4 in the can already, but
yeah.
I
Right.
mean, we know that Strange New World season 2 is done. It's coming out soon.
Yep.
Lower
Right.
Decks, they're already in the animation that's written earlier. So like
Okay.
Legacy,
Right.
I mean, Prodigy they wrote like 2 years ago, and
Right.
Oh, okay.
Lower Decks would already be written because it's supposed to debut like in a few months. So I mean, I would expect like maybe the 3rd season of Strange New Worlds in Starfleet Academy could be
Right.
affected by the writer's strike.
Yeah, and it just depends on how long this thing goes, and it probably won't be. I mean, it might be a matter of weeks. It probably won't be a long thing, so it's not going to have a huge impact.
Well,
Yeah,
it
the last
depends on
one
how long
was-
it goes.
Well,
The last
exactly.
one was 100 days. Yeah. The last one was 3 months. So
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
remember it being that long.
Yeah, they were afraid of that. One thing I found interesting, a lot of times in doing my This Week in Trek history, I don't have screenwriter's experience. What I'm amazed sometimes to see is like I'll see an episode or I'll see a date and it'll say on this date, and I'll look at it and I'll think it's the final outline. It's the first draft of an episode is submitted. And then you look and there's another thing that'll say second rewrite of the episode submitted, third rewrite of the episode submitted, and then finally final draft. So because one thing I heard was they said Hollywood was stocking up on scripts against this, but there's so many times those scripts still need polish, and that can be a problem there. You need the rewrites and the new draft versions. So that could mess them up if they don't have pure final scripts in place.
They might just put out a bunch of drafts.
Yeah. But, I mean, you're right. It does affect things like rewrites.
Yeah.
And, even actors who are part of the WGA can't like improv things or suggest things for their characters. It gets kind of sticky in that respect.
Yeah.
So
It absolutely does.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I do want to
sorry.
say I do support the guild in striking. I think they have legitimate concerns, and I think that the artists need to be protected.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay if a Trek series gets delayed a little bit. It'll be fine because you'll still have us doing a show every week.
We're not in the WGA.
We're not exactly. We don't write
Unfortunately.
any of our stuff anyway.
No.
Okay. Patrick Anderson is wondering what could some
Patrick.
possible plots be for Section 31 movie?
Oh,
That's a good point. Would it be some one big universe-threatening threat that they have to take on?
Probably.
I'm sure.
And what would
That's-
you're right.
That's every
I mean, this is from
single
the
show right
Discovery
now.
team.
Right.
Yeah,
Discovery, Picard.
because the Dominion, especially with changelings and Cardassians in the mix and Romulans, the Dominion War justified Section 31. I know some people may disagree with that, but at least justified people wanting to use a Section 31.
Yeah.
So you're right. Now they've already done the changelings and the Borg and Picard. So, and the Cardassians, I guess, have rebuilt their empire or their civilization under Garrick.
Yeah, but isn't Section 31 like set in the Kirk era?
Well, we don't know. We don't know when it's set. I mean, we know that she went back through the
good
time
point,
portal
yes.
to get back closer to her normal timeline because being in the future was bad for her because she was from another dimension.
Yeah,
whatever
thank
reason.
you for saying that, Veronica Charles. I was thinking out loud and wasn't saying because you're right. Georgia went into the Guardian, and I'm not sure what time period she's going to emerge in. So
They sort of they left it open ended so they could basically put that project anywhere they want.
Right.
The assumption is that she went back to the time from which she came, but there's no reason why she couldn't have ended up in some other place.
It's
You know how many
so
people they
Or
could
in some other dimension.
they could win so many people over if she just showed up like in the 25th century and teamed up with Worf and Garrick. And everyone's
There
like,
you
I'm
go.
on board now.
There you go. That
Yep.
would so work.
it's so
They
obvious.
do it too.
It is so incredibly obvious, but I could see a justified story with Section 31 and the prelude to the Earth Romulan War,
Could be.
especially because
Yeah.
the Romulans are so covert. You know, the whole
Yeah.
thing. Like at that time, at the time of Kirk, no one had ever even seen a Romulan,
Mm.
and
Mhm.
so I could see Section 31 being like this group that's fighting this threat that some people don't even believe exists because nobody's seen them.
Right.
And slight spoilers for Enterprise, Romulans are introduced, but again, nobody sees them. They work behind the scenes to try to foment
Right.
dissension, chaos between what was the burgeoning Federation. It hadn't formed yet. So I could see Section 1 right working against the Romulans to stop that war or to take them out before a war starts.
Yeah. I'm going to go out on a
Presu-
limb and say that she's going to join a team begrudgingly of sort of outcast characters who don't fit in society. And they're going to go
Yeah.
somewhere they're not supposed to go and do something they're not supposed to do for the good of the Federation. And then
Yes.
save the universe by the end.
That's the Guardians angle, right?
Okay. I presuming that she does go back to the time from which she came. I would really like
Mhm.
Laurel to be involved in some way.
Yes.
And having Laurel involved with 31 with some kind of Romulan threat, that would be interesting, I think.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I just think it'd be cool.
Mhm.
Okay,
Agreed.
so our good buddy Tiger Blade 2002 says, is there any type of synopsis for Section 31? Absolutely
Just
not yet.
ours.
Nope.
Just what
Yeah,
Chuck
just
made
the
up.
ones that we come up with.
Right.
And ours are great. He says, wow, one boss and a couple of thugs in a room. That's kind of a Tom Clancy-ish.
That's right. Wayne and I had a really good discussion about Section 31 a week or two ago. Really,
Oh, cool.
there was a really long and deep discussion where he was mentioning the whole things with Tom Clancy. And we were discussing that. You know, is it a cloak and dagger organization? Is it a Tom Clancy type organization? Is a CIA type organization? NSA? You know, you can throw what they say, throw any alphabets at it you want. What would they actually be like? Again, I like the smaller one where, like you said, Charles, they're like, is Sloan just want some crazy dude, yeah, by himself or not? And then later
Right.
on, when you find out some admirals are involved, well, there's something else going on.
Right.
And he also says you couldn't have a government organization without a covert operation.
True. But that's what Starfleet intelligence is. I think that's where people draw the
Right.
lines. You have the official intelligence agency, but then you have Section 31 who's supposed to break all the rules and do what they're not supposed to do. And
Right.
you know, I think I like Star Trek to have like that moral character to the Federation, you know, where they try to do things the right way. So I'm not opposed necessarily to a group of people who don't do things the right way. It really depends on how the show's framed and when it's set and who the characters are. I mean, I'm sure I'll come around to it. I like Michelle Yeoh. I would much rather see her playing Captain Georgiou than Emperor Georgiou, to be honest. But
Yes.
Right.
is what it is. You know, I think that train has sailed.
Yeah,
What we do know about Section 31, though, is being directed by Olatunde Onsen-Sanmei, who's really the principal director on Discovery.
He's fantastic.
He can be.
Oh,
I like him.
okay.
Some of his episodes I like a lot, and then sometimes it's like a quiet episode where people are just talking and he just spinning the camera around, and I feel like he got bored. But like he directed the first episode of season 3 of Discovery, where she went into the future that was set in ice or was filmed in Iceland. And I thought it was fantastic. He did a great job.
It really was.
Episode.
Right.
I guess only the really good ones of his stick out in my mind.
Right. And then it's being directed by Craig Sweeney. I mean, written by Craig Sweeney, who was a writer and producer on the first season of Discovery for like the first half or something. And then, but he's got a lot of sci-fi credit. He worked on the 4400 under Renee Echevarria, who had previously been on DS9, and a few other things that are in that vein. So, I mean, he's not new to sci-fi or new to Star Trek at this point. So, we've got at least some folk. I like, though, I mean, and this is sort of segue into the next thing, but like Alex Kurtzman has described this as phase 2 of Star Trek, of their era of Star Trek, I should say. And they said that they're planning to do one of these streaming movies every 2 years, which is what I've been saying they should do. I mean, you don't have. You can tell Star Trek stories that don't cost 500 million and have to make $1 billion to be profitable.
Yeah.
That you
Yes.
could do on the TV. I mean, the TV side, they've been doing feature level stuff for several years now and proving that they can
Right.
handle it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
I would.
also, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Alan.
No.
Also, I was just going to say real quickly, you can therefore justify exposure to all kinds of different characters that might not be justified in a series.
Right.
Which is cool, you know?
Right. And I would like to see it more often than that.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
You know,
Yeah,
I mean,
agree.
I would. I don't know what I'm going to say. Never mind. But I would really like to see something like that more than once every 2 years.
Again,
Just
to
so
go
you can
back
explore parts of the galaxy that you wouldn't normally get.
Right.
Yeah, to go back in time to when I was a child, a kid, there were all these TV movies. There were mystery movies. There was a series starring the late great Rock Hudson called Macmillan and Wife. There were shows like McCloud. There were all these things. Some of them became series, but they often had movies. And sometimes what we would call whole series really existed just as television movies. And like you were saying, Alan, there would be 1 or 2 of those movies a season. And it would be 90 minutes instead of an hour, and it would be more packed with a more dense plot. And those are great ways to get into this world and engage with characters without the studio at the time to justify, which at the time was 26 to 28 episodes. So you could do movies about 7 while everybody's belly aching, saying, "Please give us a Captain 7 series." Well, they could do a movie and then go from there. You know, you could do. If only every books would cooperate, you could do a Deep Space Nine television movie. You could do all kinds of stuff, and then see what sticks.
Yeah, and
right.
Also, like TV movie doesn't have the same connotation. It had a sort of negative and cheap connotation when we were younger. But now, I mean, movies they'll come out on streaming the same day that they come out in theaters sometimes. You know, that window has dropped dramatically, and there's not really much of a difference between films that go to the big screen versus the small screen, other than you can't see it in the cinema. But I mean, we're talking about the first Star Trek TV movie in quotes, but it's starring the lady who just won the Academy Award for Best Actress. You know, I mean, like it's a bigger deal.
They should do a theatrical release, even if it's one day, because that's extra income for them, and I would go see it.
Don't
in
do
a theater.
Thing. Charge for it and guarantee us seats.
Yeah, charge for it and don't make us drive to Cumming, Georgia, please.
Thank you.
But
Thank you.
I would love to go see it on the big screen, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I would watch it again on Paramount.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yes. Okay. Dan Leckie chimes in with a return of short treks would be preferable to him than either the telefilm or the legacy concepts. Now, first of all, yes, I 100% want a return of short treks.
Those are fantastic.
100%.
Yeah, well, they could be. I felt like short treks were very hit and miss. There were some really good ones, and some that I did not like at all. But
agreed. But I still love the concept of it. I still love the idea of having those extra chapters, basically.
Yeah, I mean, people have talked for years about that they'd love to see a Star Trek anthology series.
Yes.
Kind of like the Twilight Zone, but in the Star Trek universe.
Yes.
And just recently, Akiva Goldsman was saying he'd love to do one.
Ooh,
but
yes.
I would love for them to expand it into a full show, where short treks to me still felt like bonus material. I'd love for them to just do a full. And now that they've got several different standing sets for different eras, different costumes, different, you know what I mean? Like you could do a whole extra show for not much more money.
That's true. They could.
Right.
They would still fall into the trap of building whole new sets and whole new costumes and redesigning everything to give the new show its own look. So they'd still spend all the same money that they would spend anyway. But
we have to redesign all the aliens again.
You know, Charles, I hadn't even thought about what you guys are talking about, a Star Trek anthology series.
Yeah.
With like a different episode. Because I remember, and I got to go back to our Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine had some behind the scenes war episodes that were so amazing. There was one episode where, spoilers though, haven't seen the episode where Nog lost his leg. The episode where Jake Sisko ran away in the middle of battle, kind of like the Red Badge of Courage. I could see an anthology show that just grabs any war, the Earth Cardassian War, the Earth Romulan War, and does one show about soldiers or people stuck on a colony fighting those aliens, just like Deep Space Nine did. And that'd be a great episode. And then the next week, we've talked about this so many times, an episode dealing with the medical starships, like the one Beverly commanded for a while, and
Right.
move on to something else.
Right. Like when they had that set standing, they could have saved it and done an extra episode on it on a different show's budget and amortize those costs. But also they have that big volume stage now that can do digital environments where you could do whole alien planets and stuff of the week without having to invest a whole lot extra.
Right.
Absolutely.
The possibilities are endless.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree with you, Alan. I think I would like to see the short treks come back, but I wouldn't want to do it at the sacrifice of the movies, the TV movies.
Right.
Yeah. I'd rather have short treks.
Oh, really? I think Charles and I would rather have the movies, right, Charles?
I would.
Movies?
As long as the movies are going to be good. If they're all going to be dumb, then I don't want that. But like you have a lot of opportunity, I think, to do unusual stories for Star Trek. But I'd love it if they just did like a really great Star Trek movie. Like there's all these great movies that people have sort of a list of like the greatest movies, the greatest Star Trek movies that aren't Star Trek movies. And it's like Run Silent, Run Deep, or Master and Commander, or Crimson Tide. Like I'd love a great filmmaker to do something in the Star Trek universe. It's just a great Star Trek movie on a ship, on a mission. You know what I mean? Instead of like, it's like Star Trek, but with clowns or something, or whatever they're going to do.
Klingon clowns specifically.
Right.
Look, the one episode of Trek that features a clown is that crazy Voyager episode that creeps me out. So I can do it out.
No, there's two now.
Yep.
What's the?
I want to see them. Sorry.
Oh yeah. Sorry, you're right.
I want to see them do some location shoots at SeaWorld and do a whole TV movie around cetacean ops.
That would be cool.
It would be like Flipper in space. It would be brilliant.
Starring George and Gracie.
Correct.
What happened to them next?
Yeah, we don't know what happened to them. I mean, just two of them repopulating a whole species is kind of difficult.
Well, we know what they're up to. All right. We want to move on to the next thing?
Super quick.
Yeah.
Wayne says, yes, the 90-minute movie format was great. And Dan says that the original concept of the Discovery was that it would be an anthology show.
But it was going to be season by season.
Season by season.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Kind of like
Until
American
someone
Horror
figured out
Story
that
is.
like costs more money, you need to use the same ship again.
Yeah.
Right.
Quick question, Charles. In the Facebook discussion, you were defining what they were defining as phase 2. What is phase 2 actually called?
Right. Well, I think of the current era of Star Trek from 2017 to now.
Yes.
And kind of like Marvel has phase 2 and phase 3. Kurtzman was calling this it's going to kick off the phase 2 of Star Trek. Not necessarily Star Trek from 1966 to now. That wasn't phase 1, but just of this current era, they're going into the next phase.
I see.
And as several people have pointed out, there's already been a phase 2 of Star Trek that didn't get made with Lieutenant Zahn and Ilia.
Right.
So what we're watching now with the Lower Decks, Picard, Strange New Worlds, is he calling that phase 2?
That's phase 1.
That's phase 1.
Oh,
Right.
I see.
So it just means they're going into the next phase of Star Trek, and things are going to be a little bit different.
I see. So phase 1 in New Trek. That can get confusing, but I got you.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, as part of that, though, the next series that's announced is Starfleet Academy.
Yes.
And
interesting move.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's going to be very much geared toward that sort of CW type audience.
Yeah.
Right.
With the people who are involved. I know. I have the same thought. Like I think a lot of people are going to be against it. Now, some of those shows can be good. And I think that they've had a lot of success so far with doing Star Trek for like other type of genres. Like I wasn't excited about an adult animated comedy Star Trek or a kids Star Trek for Nickelodeon, but those both wound out to be fantastic shows.
Right.
So, I mean, it could be that this is the next great thing, or it could be we're going to have a rough time watching it.
I'll probably really love it.
Because I start bringing in all my built-in prejudices, and I'm starting to think Felicity, the OC, the 100, all those Dawson's Creek and all that kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, oh no, that could be. Yeah.
The OC wasn't CW.
Is it?
No.
Is it Beverly Hills 1701?
Veronica, this is more your wheelhouse as far as a genre goes.
Yeah.
Like, what do
Yeah.
you think of Star Trek, Starfleet Academy in this genre?
So I can see that. There's a lot of high school drama shows that they do on the CW, and they've attempted to do space-based ones before, but they never really got off the ground very much. But that was because they didn't have the history that Star Trek will. Because I think a large portion of fans will at least give it a chance, like they did with Prodigy and Lower Decks, where they're Star Trek and science fiction fans, older, typically male, are not going to watch this space show about teenagers on the CW. But if they do that and slap Star Trek on it, they're more likely to at least give it a chance.
Yeah, I mean, there have been a few like not necessarily space but genre ones recently. Like I think Sabrina, and they did that with the Addams Family. They just did the Wednesday Addams show. This sort of in that genre as well, where it's about Wednesday Addams, but she's going off to like a supernatural prep school of some kind, you know. Whereas this is going to be, it's a format that I think works for that genre. It's presumably a young person heading off to a new weird school, but that weird school, instead of being Hogwarts or whatever it is in Wednesday, it's going to be Starfleet Academy, where all of a sudden there's aliens and space adventures and science things happening. So I think that, and it's naturally young people that's been set up in the Star Trek universe since the 60s. So I think it makes sense.
I agree. And for one thing, before we got Prodigy, anything younger than adult wasn't being targeted by Star Trek.
Right.
But so now we have most markets covered except for teen. And I think this is a perfect vehicle to hit that teen market.
Right.
And I will bet you that they, just like Prodigy does, I will bet you they have a broadcast partnership with somebody.
I hope so.
I don't think that they're going to be expecting Starfleet Academy to bring a teen audience to Paramount Plus. I'll bet you that they have it platformed somewhere else, just like Prodigy is on Nickelodeon.
Yeah, and I think, aside from the animated series where they actually there was a toy line and there was a kids Saturday morning cartoon. Since then, they like you said, they really haven't. And that's one of the mistakes.
Even Prodigy, did they do a toy line for Prodigy at all?
They are. The toys are out now.
Right.
Yeah, but that's a mistake I think that the Berman era made, was that they were targeting the exact same audience for every one of those
every show.
shows.
Exactly.
Whereas they can't just cater to us for Star Trek shows, because we're going to keep getting older. There's going to be fewer and fewer of us, Like, it makes sense to try to snag kids, snag teenagers, snag college kids.
And as I've said before, that is where Star Wars, may the fourth be with you, Star Wars has been enormously successful. They have product lines that hit every age group. And they're all good quality. And I'm not just talking television or movies, the book series, the easy reader books. There's so much stuff that is Star Wars that any person at any age is going to get hooked on Star Wars. And Trek has not done a good job with that historically.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, like my preference for a show about Starfleet Academy would be more like the episode The Valiant and less like 90210. But but I'm sure there's going to be love angst and young person drama and stuff going on, and I'm fine with that as long as like they're doing real like Star Trek adventures along the way. Like when I was a kid, I used to read there was a series of young adult books about Starfleet Academy, and I used to read the ones about Worf, and it was Worf at the Academy. And like the adventures, they would he'd be in school sometimes and he'd be off on a planet sometimes, and I enjoyed them. So
absolutely. And I think it has a lot of potential for that kind of setting. I think it's going to be really good. Oh shit, I was going to say something and I forgot. Never mind.
It's funny, Charles, and you kept saying snagging this and snagging that. I'm thinking freaking CW clone. They'll be shagging each other all the time.
They probably well, if I was at Starfleet Academy, I probably would too.
Right. So, okay, let's speculate a little bit for just a few minutes because we've got another topic to get onto. But so when you're doing a typical Starbase set show, you have the set of characters that you expect to have. You have a captain and a first officer and an engineer and a medical officer and a science officer, blah, blah, blah. So how do you think they are going to build a set of characters around Starfleet Academy? Will we have that kind of setup? Because, they'll be doing like mission mock-ups, So do you think that our show is going to be centered around the kids who are positioned on a, like a mock adventure?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know if they'll, I'm sure they'll have mock adventures, but I'm sure they'll also have real adventures where the cadets will be along for,
right.
Right. But
and of
when we
course,
talked about before there was announced, when we were talking about what we would want for a Starfleet Academy series, and my idea was kind of, it's like a cross between the Breakfast Club and a traditional Star Trek cast lineup, where you have the kids, that'll be 18 to 22, I would guess, but played by 30-year-olds. But there'll be the sort of charismatic captainy type, and there'll be the sort of the bookish engineer type, and there'll be the sciencey type, and the, you know what I mean? That's what I would expect. You have the jock and the nerd and so forth.
Right.
And hopefully they'll do something really interesting with them, though, and cast them well. That's really the key, I think.
Right. And because you don't necessarily want the jock to be the security guy and the nerdy one to be the science guy. I mean, that makes sense. But it would be more interesting to see them thrown into opposite roles. And, they may do that. They may put them, because everybody has to be cross-trained. When you're in Starfleet Academy, you're going to learn multiple disciplines. You're not going to have one guy who all he does is security. They have to all do everything because you have to understand the way a ship and a crew works. And by doing that, you have to understand how different positions operate. So it's going to be interesting to see them being cast into roles that don't necessarily fit their personalities. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Right. And see how they develop as the show goes on. Hopefully, they'll develop, like the characters will develop in ways that you don't expect. Like I'd said before, what we know about Kirk and Picard at the Academy was their personalities were basically flipped. Kirk was a nerd, and Picard was sort of a wild young man, and that's not who they grew up to be. So I'd love to see that evolution in an Academy show. Now,
see it happen.
Yeah, exactly. And for it to be unexpected. Now, what little we know about the show, in the synopsis, there was a line that said Starfleet Academy is reopening for the first time in 100 years, which makes it sound like this is a 32nd century show.
It has to be.
Yeah.
Because that was why they moved Tilly off of Discovery and moved her to Starfleet Academy. That's got to be the setup.
Right.
That would make sense.
And now that they're back to Earth, Earth is rejoining the Federation, and they can reopen Starfleet Academy. I think that's a good starting point. And, I mean, I like the 32nd century, so I'm happy to see them continue developing it. I think it's interesting. I like to see how the different races are different in the future.
Exactly. And I also want a Boothby type character.
Yes.
There has to be a Boothby type character.
I was just going to say that too, Alan, because unfortunately Ray Walston has long since passed.
Right.
They wouldn't get a gardener. Maybe this time it'll be somebody like Chef from South Park. Maybe it'll be the cook. Maybe the cook will be their advisor.
Yes.
No, don't ever bring South Park into Star Trek. No.
So you don't want him singing Barry White every episode, bro?
I mean, speaking of which, though, it's sort of a convention of these types of shows that there's a lot of like contemporary pop type music in it.
That's true.
And I was just complaining about Picard having too much contemporary pop music in it. But so we'll see. I hopefully it won't just be, it won't feel like today, but in the future, hopefully they'll remember that they're 1100 years from now and do something interesting with the time.
Yes. But at the same time, they will be concerned about a contemporary teen audience being able to connect with it, who aren't necessarily Trekkies.
Right.
You know what I mean?
At the very least, hopefully they'll be like studying Taylor Swift and classical music or something.
Exactly.
Well, one thing, since I hadn't thought about that angle of the Academy has been shuttered for a century, one thing that can do is it can give them, there can be a lot of doubts around them. You know what I mean? This is not, in all the Star Treks we've seen, going to the Academy is absolutely the coolest thing on the planet. Oh, you're in the Academy. You're awesome. You're going to be awesome. in this world, in this future, there could be a lot of doubts about that. There can still be doubts about whether this revived Federation is going to work. This may not be, for some people, the best career move they can make in that time. You know, I could see that. And then you can see people from really ravaged planets going to this as their best. Tasha Yar, you know, from the planet she came from, was this horrible planet they kept talking about and mentioned those gangs, you know, that weird gangs they used to talk about. And you can see in this future that's been so messed up by the lack of the dilithium, you can see people coming from really almost backwards planets going into a Starfleet and seeing things they've never seen before, technology they've never seen before.
Right.
There's a lot of possibility. There could be people from parts of the galaxy that have literally been isolated from the rest of the galaxy since the dilithium, whatever that thing was called.
Yeah, the burn.
The burn, yeah. You could have whole species who will be completely freaked out going somewhere and seeing all these different species.
Well, that was part of the premise in that episode, All Is Possible, when Tilly was with the cadets, was that those cadets and the Academy in general, like the different species were unaccustomed to working with one another.
Right.
You know, so there was a lot of friction between them for that reason. They had to sort of learn to work together.
Right.
And that I'd love to see that storyline continuing, which
absolutely
makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, a couple of things. Our buddy Dan says, I wish Trek would do a live action comedy show for adults. I'm with you. And I have said, you know, I've said many times that I want there to be a Starfleet medical drama. I want there to be a Starfleet, a Law and Order kind of show, you know, a police procedural, all that kind of stuff. It would be fun if the comedy one was in the vein of Scrubs, where it's a serious medical show with funny characters and, you know, who face real world trauma, but have a lot of snappy dialogue. I think that would be so much fun. And it wouldn't have to be the medical one. It could be anything. It could be, you know, like the Law and Order, but instead it would be like Trek Night Court.
Yeah, or MASH, which is also medical. But
MASH.
Yeah,
I hadn't thought of that.
MASH would be great.
Genius. All right. Wayne says, I was going to ask you guys if you think the front office, the Trek production office, is a little too tunnel visioned with their target marketing practices. Keith and I talked about how they try to make the genre fit the mass audience and it doesn't always work.
Well, I think you have to do that to some extent.
Yes.
I mean, I think that if you're just doing Star Trek-y shows for people who like Star Trek-y shows, then you're gonna have a dwindling audience.
Yeah.
You know,
right.
I think it makes sense to do. I mean, really what they're doing, and something I think Kurtzman has done really well, is bringing in different creators with different visions of what Star Trek is and could be, and letting them do their thing.
Yeah.
You know, people like to blame Kurtzman for everything that's not good, whether it, but I mean, sometimes that's him letting, you know, Michael Chabon follow his vision for what Star Trek is, or Patrick Stewart follow his vision, or Brian Fuller follow his vision, even if it's not something that we like. But then when Terry Matalas comes along and he lets him do the same thing, all of a sudden Terry Matalas is the savior and Alex Kurtzman sucks. You know what I mean? When really he's just, I mean, Alex Kurtzman is the one who's recruiting all these people. Mike McMahon and Michelle Paradise and the Hageman brothers. He's bringing all these folks in with different visions of what Star Trek is, and really, I mean, not making them fit it into a mold.
Yeah.
Which I think is nice.
Yeah, because that's why Deep Space Nine worked so well, is because they weren't forced into a mold.
It wasn't trying to, I mean, it tried to be TNG again a little at first, and that did not work.
Right.
But then they had Voyager they tried to make TNG.
And Wayne, that's a really good point about the discussion we had, and discussion I think that Charles and Alan were just saying now too, which is you don't want to have too much tunnel vision, because, you know, for some of us, Star Trek going on in the same mold and mode is fine. But you're right, you want to bring in new people. And then that goes back to those movies. You can use those movies to try new things as well, new approaches. Again, you don't want to and don't have the money and the resources to have series that fail, but you can try movies and see what sticks. That may be something completely different from what we want to see or think we want to see.
He counters with, but the audience is dwindling now.
I don't know if that's true. Because I mean, the latest season of Picard, I mean, they hit the top 10 streaming shows. They don't usually, but I think the subscriber base of Paramount Plus is what we're looking at, and that seems to be growing. So I don't know. We don't get like Nielsen ratings like we used to.
Exactly. So, there's no way to know those things until a streaming service shuts down, and then you find out, oh, they had completely lost all their subscribers.
Right.
But we don't know how these things perform, other
That's
than
true.
when you get those reports that say, however many more subscribers came in this year, or Picard was the #1 streamer of the, whatever. So but you don't get those real-time ratings like we are familiar with network television.
Right. I mean, one thing we do know though is that, I mean, Star Trek Discovery, for instance, is getting its second spinoff and also a spinoff movie. So that, I mean, it doesn't seem to me like Paramount Plus is disappointed with its, you don't keep making more of a show that's failing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If the first Law and Order doesn't make any money, you don't make 5 more.
What's super interesting though is that for Discovery spinoffs, one is potentially set early on 22nd century, and the other one is potentially set 32nd century. So it's spun off into 2 completely different 1,000-year apart time frames. I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Dan says, I hope they have a Barclay-like character in the Starfleet Academy show, someone unsure of themselves who others help. They've got a chance to correct the flaw of The Trouble with Edward, the short Trek episode, with the new character not just being blamed as an idiot. Make the characters relatable and sympathetic to the audience. Don't Red Squad them.
That's what Tilly was. Tilly kind of sort of was that, the person who had a little bit of lack of fake confidence in herself at first. And was always struggling to overcome her lack.
And everyone loved her.
And everyone, exactly.
Yeah.
And that episode where she takes the cadets out and they're on the planet and they have the monster and blah blah blah. That's one of my favorite episodes of that season.
Yeah,
I loved seeing her in that position, and I loved seeing those cadets, those student age characters, put in that situation where they're learning to work together. They're learning how to be Star Trek.
Absolutely.
Great stuff.
And real quick before we move on, I just wanted to mention that Tawny Newsome has announced that she's in the writer's room for Starfleet Academy, which I think is great. I mean, for one, I love to see people from different shows, like working on different shows. But Tawny Newsome is like super funny, and so that gives me a lot of confidence.
Super into Star Trek.
Yeah,
like
she'll
argue with the writers on Lower Decks.
She argues with Mike
McMahon
McMahon all the time.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, she's the real deal, man.
It's funny y'all say that, because for the first time, I have never watched The Ready Room before now. And for the last, I've never watched I've just never watched it. And for the last several days, as I've been doing chores and stuff around the house, I've been listening to The Ready Room. And I listened to Tawny Newsome on The Ready Room last night, talking to Will Wheaton, and she was impressive. Incredibly knowledgeable, incredibly, like you said, she can be real funny, and then she just talks about things with such a seriousness and an understanding of serious human nature. I could see how she's a writer as well as an actress. She was incredibly impressive.
She is a smart lady.
Yeah.
She also co-hosts the Pod Directive with Paul F. Tompkins, which is the official Star Trek podcast, which I recommend. It's good and it's funny.
Yeah.
But if you have to listen to something other than us.
Right.
No, don't. Okay, we got only a few minutes left. So what's our next topic?
So let's move into a potential show that's not been announced, but what everyone else is clamoring for, which is Star Trek Legacy.
Right on, baby.
Yeah.
And what's so funny is we have given it a name. You know, I mean, that name is just stuck. The name is stuck. It's like if it comes out and it's not named Star Trek Legacy, we're going to say, what the hell? You know, because it's so funny. That is literally the name attached to that project that has not been greenlit.
Right.
Yeah.
And I doubt that'll stick as a name.
Yeah. I don't know. That was Terry Metalis' name for it. He started that. So
and we all use it now.
Yeah. I mean, but really, as long as he's doing a show, I think people go with whatever title. But I mean, this doesn't necessarily mean anything, but I believe that CBS the CBS Studios has got the domain name Star Trek Legacy now. I believe I read that they have now registered that domain name, which could just be somebody in legal covering their bases.
Exactly.
You are correct.
Exactly.
And actually, Charles, if I'm not mistaken, I read too. I think somebody owned Star Trek Legacy. There was one of those. They sold it, and they didn't sell it for as much as I would have sold it for. You know,
right. Keith is all about bilking CBS.
Yes.
Hey man, they got it.
Look, my price for this is you actually make this show.
Right.
I would sell it for that.
Yeah, I think that's a great deal.
Yeah.
So real quickly, if they did a legacy, would you keep the characters we saw at the end of Picard, and what would you want that show's focus to be? Would you want to just be an episode of the week, or some kind of specific purpose, specific kind of mission?
Well, when we just recently appeared on the Earth Station 1 podcast,
Mhm.
which everybody should go listen to, we were talking about Picard season 3. I had a little bit to say about this, so I'll just repeat a little bit of it here. That, I mean, if a few years ago someone had said, I've got the great idea for a Star Trek show. It's about Picard and Crusher's son and LaForge's daughter, and they have a flirtation with each other, and they're on the new Enterprise, captained by Seven of Nine. I'd be like, that is the dumbest fanfic idea I've ever heard in my life.
Yes.
Like, just throw in Molly O'Brien and Alexander Roshenko, and it'll just be Star Trek TNG Junior.
There you go.
But I will say that I do really like the characters and the actors. I think
Yes.
it's goofy that people think that the only way forward for Star Trek is with the kids of the old Star Trek, and with Q showing up to, like, it just to me, it just is the most fanish idea. I do
Yes.
like the setup for it. I will definitely watch it if it comes out.
Agreed.
But I mean, it's extremely just like the, snake eating its own tail, as far as like, we got to get some new ideas in there. It can't just be guess who's back this week from old 90s Star Trek.
Agreed.
Right.
I do think Seven of Nine, again, I say this all the time, for me to say this is pretty major. I think Seven of Nine has earned her stripes, and
Yes.
such that you could explore the uniqueness of the kind of character she is, where she could absolutely lead a show.
Mhm.
And there's so many things they could do, because she was a ranger for all those years. And I'd love to see that ranger bring whatever that is to be a ranger into this show. Kind of like, in Picard, Beverly Crusher, and by the way, guys, we were talking about TV movies. I'd love to see a TV movie. What the heck happened to Beverly Crusher during those 20 years? When did she leave Starfleet Medical? What kind of adventures was she on? But she basically said, is I go places where Starfleet Medical doesn't go, the places you guys have kind of forgotten. I'd love to see Seven kind of want to pay attention to that, because she's been a ranger out there for years, fighting all kinds of stuff. And I'd love to see something like that come onto it. Not saying it's got to be a quote unquote dark and gritty show, but I'd like to see something like that.
I mean, they even said it in that last episode of the Picard, and I may be misremembering the titles, but a ranger, a spy, and a thief. What are we going to do now?
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I think it's a shame that I think that a lot of Star Trek fans who were clamoring for Legacy will hold it against Starfleet Academy, that it's not that show.
Yeah.
And that it's a show in the Discovery time frame, and that it's a show geared toward younger people.
Yeah.
And I think that's a shame. I think there's room in Star Trek for new, young, fresh ideas, and there's room in Star Trek for, senior citizens, tearfully reuniting on reproductions of the old sets. But Star Trek can't just be that. You're going to run out of senior citizens at some point. We got to get the new and fresh in there, along with making use of the history of the show. And I've said before, I think that 90s Star Trek has just a huge number of characters and situations that you can pull from.
Yeah.
But I don't want Star Trek to just be retreading what it did in the 90s.
100%.
Agreed.
100%.
Yeah. There's so much more to explore than just that one militaristic
I mean, like,
aspect.
look what Lower Decks did with the pack lead.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's great.
they took something from the 90s and just like exploded it.
Yeah.
One thing that I don't think that Star Trek has done very well since 2017 is introducing new memorable races and planets.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got like Saru's planet, maybe the planet from Prodigy, but otherwise it's been a lot of guess who's back.
Right. Yeah. That's a very good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
That is a great point.
Yeah. There's not been any new equivalent of Klingon or Romulan or Cardassian or whatever that fills that void, that fills that role, that it becomes the iconic thing from this era of Trek.
Right.
And I wonder how much of that is that we used to get 26 episodes a year, and now we get 10, and you don't have as much time. But if you had devoted, like something along those lines in one of those shows and just made something like, I don't know, I don't even know, but you make a good point, and I don't know where the hell I'm going with that.
Right.
But no, you're right. They haven't done that.
I agree, and I agree, and that's why sometimes I get frustrated. I get frustrated with the callbacks to races like the Gorn or something like that, because as you said, the original series, everything they did was new. And even Next Generation, when they introduced the Cardassians didn't reach their fullness until Deep Space Nine. But they
Right.
planted such a rich race that they built on that, and that was new. You got to take swings. You got to throw something against the wall and see what sticks. That's the only way.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But-
I mean,
but
they
they-
did the same thing with the Trill.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was
Mhm.
going to say.
Ferengi.
The Trill and the Ferengi, and
Yeah.
but the big one that they had was the Borg.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
all those things were good concepts. They were introduced well, they were developed well, and we just
Mhm.
haven't had that in the modern era.
Right. Yeah, because there's such a focus now on like nostalgia,
Mhm.
on
Right.
bringing back and either reinventing or recreating something from the past. I would love for them to just create something that's just tell a great story, and if the creature of the week warrants it, do it again. You
Yes.
know, it's
Yeah.
like with Doctor Who. I always get excited when there's a Dalek or a Cyberman episode, but at some point you got to create like the Weeping Angels. You got to add to the pot.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah. So, Charles, that
yeah.
then explains. That's some insight. Then that explains why you liked it. Was it the 10C in Discovery so much?
I do like the 10C. That's
Yeah.
I do
I
too.
thought very memorable. I don't know that they're a race that we're going to see a whole lot, but I would love to get
Right.
more exploration of them. That's
I
a good
remember
point,
you-
though. That was a memorable alien.
Yeah. I remember you and Alan talking about how much y'all like that
Yeah.
species, and now that makes even more sense why you like them so much.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I didn't
it
know what
was
they
a
were going to
very-
be.
Yeah, it was a very high concept idea
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was executed well and was really engaging, I thought.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, comment. Dan Leckie says a similar thing. This is about registering the URL. A similar thing happened with the upcoming Nick Meyer audio drama. SETI Alpha 5 was registered as a trademark before it was announced, which always happens. By the
Mhm.
way, more than any other current scheduled project, that is the one that he's most excited about.
Yeah, I haven't heard about that in a while. So
I haven't either. I've not heard anything about that.
And I still think that like podcast is something that Star Trek should move more into, like audios.
Mhm.
So I hope that they
Mm.
do, and I hope that they keep moving in that direction.
That would be a great way for them to do the nostalgia stuff.
True, because as long as Patrick Stewart is alive, he doesn't have to be able to run and jump down corridors and fight aliens. He can just record his voice, and it's going to be amazing.
Right.
Yeah, and Armin
Yeah.
Shimmerman doesn't have to put on all the Ferengi makeup, and he'll be more than happy to do Quark
Right?
for the rest of his life.
It's funny you
Exactly.
say that. It's funny you said that, Alan, because just last night a feed popped up on my phone that said Jonathan Frakes is getting ready to do a new, another voice work, more voice work for a Star Trek game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. That Star Trek Resurgence has Riker in it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow. Amazing.
Dan makes another good point. He says he's looking forward to seeing more of Captain Angel in Strange New Worlds.
Yeah.
I think Angel has the potential to be that sort of memorable villain, that really charismatic character, like we've seen in characters like Gul Dukat.
Right.
I think that Angel has that potential, and pairing them up with Cybok, I think is a really interesting move. And that's, as I've said a week or two ago, that's the thing that I'm most excited about next season of Strange New Worlds, is seeing how that develops, that situation between those two.
And that's something that they're pulling in something new,
Yes.
but they're pairing it with something that's nostalgic.
Mhm.
So
It's
they're
nostalgic,
pulling
but
both
not-
of them together.
Right.
Right.
It's nostalgic, but not overly done, not over it's not another Klingon or whatever, which
Right.
it's something that we've only seen one time. We know very little about. There's a lot of room to develop. Yes.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's practically new.
Right.
Nice.
All right. We want to wrap this thing up.
Yeah.
Wrap it up.
All right. So next week, the plan is we're going to be talking about a little bit of something that's a hot button topic in the real world, but commonplace on Star Trek, which is the role of AI in society.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
something that a part of that really interests me is the role of AI in art, and the way that that's reflected in the Star Trek universe, and while our current society is barely beginning to grapple with it. So tune in next week for that. If you have any opinions on that, give us a call on the Earth Station Trek hotline. You can get us at 307-387-1701 and leave us a voice message, or you can also email an MP3 to earthstationtrek@gmail.com. And we'd love to play your message on the show and respond to it. You can also message us the old-fashioned way if you have any thoughts about that, or save it up
The
for the show.
old-fashioned way. Email.
You can, or you can,
Or you can We don't have a mailing address. Sorry.
Yep. Or you can save it up and message us on the show about it.
Right.
All right. So that'll be next
I-
Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern.
In
That-
fact,
I'm looking forward to that.
I very much encourage someone to use ChatGPT to generate their question to us.
Wow.
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 There you go.
All right.
That was weird.
All right. Alan, where can people find more of you?
I'm right here.
Where can I
Anyway,
find
sorry.
more?
Oh, more. Oh, even more. Okay. Cosmicpress.com. KOZMICpress.com.
And how about you, Keith?
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, primarily the ESO Network Facebook groups.
And how about us, Veronica?
Feltnerdy.com.
And
Monkeying Around, a podcast about the monkeys.
yep.
And we also have a convention appearance, not just as Felt Nerdy, but
That's right.
Earth Station Trek.
Yep. Half of us will be at doing an Earth Station Trek panel at Metrotham in Chattanooga. That's the weekend of, what are the dates, Veronica?
I don't remember.
Me either. My mouse
The
is unplugged.
13th? Is that
Yep,
the 13th?
that'll be on the Saturday the 13th at 2 p.m. is when we're currently scheduled. And while you're there, you can take in a couple of Felt Nerdy shows and come see us at our table, and we'll be doing a little panel about Star Trek. So
And Jonathan Frakes will be there.
that's right. Not on our
On
panel.
your panel?
No.
No. Well, we had to find someone to fill in for you, Alan. So no, Frakes will not be on our panel, but he'll be at the con. So
Yep.
It should be a lot of fun. And we're going to try to get into more of these conventions and try to
Yeah.
get there as a group when they're hopefully more local, and we can get a confirmation soon enough where I can plan to be there. But it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
All right, Veronica, do you have a closing for us?
Live long and prosper.
All right, perfect. I'll take it.
All right,
Thanks
everybody.
again, everybody, for
See you next
participating.
week.